and we speak now to Thobani Zikalala, who's a political commentator, who, of course, is going to be giving us some analysis as we continue to look at this particular story. Mr. Zikalala, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'm going to start before we even get into the meat of what they were talking about. The different receptions that both candidates received at the end of their speech. You think about John Steenhuisen, a resounding applause there, the House standing up, so, really applauding what he's had to say, in stark contrast to what Mpho Phalatse had to say. And we saw some people looking disinterested. Your reaction?
I think for me, good afternoon. I think for me, the DA Congress and how it has come about, especially with those who are contesting, I think this time around, of course, is this people for fanfare, but it has not given this idea that there's a big contestation happening. I think sometimes political parties go into congresses because the time to go to Congress has come, but you can really see in terms of the energy that there is not really much that is being said by both the candidates. Of course, Mpho Phalatse comes across as a bit more charismatic. She seems to be going for the heart of the DA membership, with John Steenhuisen coming out across as someone who's giving a bit of more stability, as you can say, in terms of how he's speaking. I think, for me, there's not really much meat that these two candidates are giving us that we can really write home about.
And I'm going to get into some of what Mr. John Steenhuisen had to say, but, ending off there by saying that we've fixed the DA, now it is time for us to fix South Africa. Have they really fixed the DA?
I don't think so. The DA seems to still, in terms of, if they say they fixed the DA, they must tell us that the DA has come out of the shadow of being a party that seems and is perceived by the public to be a white party. They seem not to have gotten over that. They seem to have not gotten over being a party that is much more for the middle class and the upper classes, that is unable to govern lower classes areas. This is a DA that seems that its internal democratic processes have not been up to standard. This is a DA that is still embargoed by disciplinary issues. But also this is a DA which in public is still perceived as a Helen Zille party, where Helen Zille still seems as the person who's really in charge of the political trajectory of where the DA must go. So if any of the DA leaders, and John Steenhuisen in particular, claim that they have fixed the DA, these for me are part of the indicators that they must indicate that they've been able to go through. And I don't think so. The DA today, with its crumbling coalition governments that are crumbling, and one person that is being fingered out is Helen Zille as being the one who is in charge of that. And it's not that the other leaders of the party are able to come out.
And interesting to see that she now runs uncontested. But of course, we talk about, what they've had to say. There was an interesting point, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this one before we move into some of what they've put down as their resolutions. John Steenhuisen says that one of his, pillars, his 7 pillars, as he says, is to end cadre deployment. This has been one of these confusing issues, because you look at the fact that when a political party is to have its own policies and its own ideals, and it now goes into government, who does it pick then to be able to run with those particular ideals? So is it a possibility that they do end cadre deployment, particularly when it comes to some of these policy positions that have also been controversial?
My sister, any political party worth its salt all over the world, and that claims that it will end cadre deployment, it's simply lying on the basis of the fact that cadre deployment is not such a bad policy in principle. Of course, people may speak about how other political parties have applied this cadre deployment policy and how it has led into some parts of government crashing and crumbling because people who have been deployed are not correct. But cadre deployment on principle is correct, as you say. Any party will want in government to have those who agree with its policy direction and with its principles. No party will, for example, as a DA, as perceived as a democratic liberal party, will not go and appoint into government someone who maybe in terms of ideological belief is a communist. That will be against its policies, that will be against its vision for the country. So I don't think, of course, it is nice, it's a catchphrase that everyone is speaking about. And of course, the DA has been in the forefront, especially when it comes to the ANC with its cadet deployment policy. But any political party worth its salt that wants to govern a country cannot govern with people who do not agree with them. So maybe the issue here is the naming of the policy, but any political party in the world will do this. It will appoint people who are in line with its vision, that it could be able to hold into account with the vision that it has set out for a country. So I think the DA, if it says it wants to deal with cadet deployment, for me, it's simply playing into the political gallery and knowing that in South Africa, the ANC has been much criticized because of its cadet deployment policy and how sometimes that cadet deployment policy has led to somewhat wrong appointments. But other than that, I think in a way, the DA could be saying something that they do not really mean in principle.
There's something that various leaders have said, and one of them is the youth leader there speaking to my colleague Natasha Piri, saying that if you look at some of what we've done in the Western Cape, the spreading out of resources there, is that we have made sure that we put a lot of the money, a bulk of our budget, on ensuring that we give dignity to the poor. But when you listen to various positions that come out from the Western Cape, some say that it's a tale of two provinces. It depends where you are coming from. What's your take on that?
Khayelitsha and many of the townships and many of the informal settlements in Cape Town and the Western Cape still face flooding when there's heavy rains in the Western Cape. There's still areas that are still using pit toilets and in the bucket system in the Western Cape. So that's again what I was saying in the beginning, that if anyone says that they've fixed the DA, the image of the DA is a party that governs two cities and two provinces in one, two type of places. It governs Khayelitsha and it governs Somerset West. It governs Constantia and it governs Nyanga. It governs two different distinct constituencies and it governs them differently. There's not been much improvement as of course reports come out in places like Khayelitsha, Nyanga, Elanga, Ekukulethu and others, but of course there is stability in places like Somerset West, Constantia and others. And this is not only just in the Western Cape, these allegations also go into areas like Johannesburg and others, and even in Tshwane, that they haven't been able to go beyond this idea of a two-tier type of country that they are managing. So that for me is where the crux of the thing is going to be. Will the DA be able to convince South Africans and be able internally in itself to convince its own members that it is time they build in terms of how they are governing one country and they are able to make sure that resources, especially resources into are able to be improved, so standards of living can be raised.
And Thobani, when one looks at Resolution 22, for example, it talks about these coalition arrangements and says that the party must stay true to the values and principles of the federal, constitutions as well as the councils when it comes to coalition talks and agreements. And they continue to say the party has recently been seen as an organization that is arrogant and unwilling to engage other parties in the space of coalition agreements. This is something that, of course, they need to take seriously, given the fact that some of the multi-party, parties that they are with in that own arrangement have come out to say that this is particularly the attitude that they're taking, that of a big brother.
The Achilles heel, my sister, the Achilles heel of the DA with coalition governments, especially going into 2024, which is going to be a watershed moment where we could possibly see a rise in coalition governments, especially in the province, in the provinces, and ultimately in the country. The Achilles heel of the DA with regards to that will be its inability, as perceived by parties that have been in partnership, in coalition partnership with them, its inability to humble itself and come into these coalition governments as an equal partner. There seems to be an idea in the DA where they seem to look at themselves as the honorary leader or the bestowed benevolent leader of the opposition parties in this country, where they feel and believe that it is only them who must lead these parties. And if you look at the parties that have gone into coalition with the DA, many of them are complaining was the same thing, the over-arrogance of the DA and its belief that it deserves everything that's good that comes with coalitions. And of course, as I've said in the beginning, the one person who's being singled out as a key in this arrogance of the DA and political arrogance of the DA is Helen Zille. And of course, she goes into this DA Federal Congress unopposed as a federal executive chairperson, which means going forward she will still form part and be an integral part of how the DA organizes its coalition partnerships. And for me, that will be the biggest part where the DA must have a real introspection on how it deals with other opposition parties in its quest to unseat the ANC as the governing party.
What does it tell you that she goes into this uncontested?
For me, it tells me she's in charge. The funny thing is that if you look at Helen Zille over the years, and what has been said by even other commentators and analysts, is that she seems to have crafted an image of the DA that depends on her, and the party has been unable to imagine itself outside of Helen Zille. She seems to be very much in charge, very much in control. She seems to be the head honcho of what the DA is today. Maybe she has replaced people like your Tony Leons, who in the past were viewed as leaders of the DA. And at this point, she seems to be the center of what the DA is. And again, it seems also she's going to be part of what is going to be its Achilles heel, or maybe its downfall going towards the 2024 elections.
And I'd like us to look just very briefly on some of the policies. And I wonder, in your view, do you think they're clear on what diversity looks like?
I think for me, they've got a very liberal diversity will look like. I think it's this idea that if you've got different people of different backgrounds in one space, then it is diversity. It's this idea that you need to deal with the different social forces that make South Africans different. If you don't deal with those things and you are not alive to understand what those issues are and you are able to speak about them, if you want to speak about the person who comes from Khayelitsha, you must be able to speak about the deep.
You can continue, Thobani.
Sorry, we lost each other there. So I'm saying if you want to speak about Khayelitsha, you must be able to speak about the different social forces involved there, the poverty, the landlessness, the lack of housing, the issues of crime. And in the same vein, if you want to speak about someone who comes from Somerset West, you must be able to speak about the social forces involved there, the issue of abundance of resources, the stability and the issues of crime and all those things. And this is where, for me, the DA misses it. The DA speaks about diversity, but refuses to speak about the diverse stories that South Africans bring into the table, into the building of this so-called new South Africa. You cannot want to shy away from the fact that, for example, in South Africa, if you look at people who live in townships and rural areas, there's a lot of land deprivation, a lot of landlessness. That must be a topic that the DA is able to battle with. And also to look at the fact that there are places which seem to be beach well off. This is the facts of South Africa. And the DA seems to want to shy away from that, to invite South Africans into this vision of a new South Africa without the history and the facts that bring about the South Africa we have today.
Khuzeni, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. That is Thobani Zikalala. He's a political commentator as we're looking at the DA Congress. And of course, we'll continue to monitor this particular story. We do have Natasha Piri, who is on the ground for us.